Speaking of look, rules and things that are ineptitude, we must go to Yass in the ACT and the border of New South Wales. They're now in a snap 3-day lockdown on the front of the Canberra Times tomorrow. 3 days of freedom, but now Yass is back in lockdown. The council areas of Canberra's border will go up from today and go back into a lockdown just days after being granted a reprieve by the New South Wales government. This on top of another front page story on there where businesses are being warned that they will be shut down if they're founding to not comply, considering that the ACT's COVID figures are not budging. They're being quite stubborn. And apparently businesses are now dobbing on each other. So this is probably the most Canberran story I've ever heard of. But what do you make of that? Businesses sort of dobbing in on each other if they're not complying to the COVID lockdown?
Look, I can kind of understand it because some business owners would feel like that other business owners were putting the possibility of their business being able to operate at risk, but I wouldn't like to think that we're turning into a nation of dobbers, and I think to some degree we are. But I'd be interested in the perspective of business on whether these sort of in and out lockdowns are actually worse than the long lockdowns that places like Sydney and Melbourne have had to deal with. Because the in and out lockdowns, you have no way of planning. It's there and then it's not, and it keeps happening again and again and again. Whereas at least in Sydney and Melbourne, you know where you stand. You can't do that if you're in Yass, or you can't do that if you're in Brisbane, and you keep getting plunged in and out of lockdown, particularly if you're a restaurant.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely, and that's what one of the punters that have spoken to the Canberra Times tomorrow say. You know, you go from 1 week earning $25,000 to the next week earning nothing. It's just, how do you even get that to add up? And then you see the absolute cluster that's happening with the Queensland system of getting businesses the compensation that they desire. It's just not great. I've got one final thing to touch on you with, because I'm a big advocate of anything that Jess Irvine writes in the Sydney Morning Herald, specifically this story. How do we feel about the case for a 4-day work week, my friend? Sounds pretty good, but do you think we'll just start shoehorning 5 days or 7 days into 4?
Of course we will. Look, I think instead of a 4-day working week, what we should be talking about is what your employer expects you to do, and you being able to have the flexibility to do that within the time you want. You know, we're very much wedded to this 9 to 5 thing, but I think one of the things that businesses will learn from lockdown and working from home is that perhaps some people are more productive between 7 p.m. and 3 p.m. or 6 a.m. and 2 p.m. Maybe some people are better from, 11 a.m. to 8 p.m. or whatever it is. And if they're getting the work done that you expect of them, what's the problem with that? Doesn't apply for people who have to work in a physical shop, of course, but for people who work in offices, what would be wrong with giving them the flexibility to get the work done when they are most productive? Because surely that might lead to a better outcome for the business.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I was talking to some researchers over the weekend, and we were discussing the amount of job ads that are now floating around for a whole myriad of occupations, specifically in the mining sector and the corporate world. And all of them state some of the pluses to, or the positives of their environments, that they offer flexible work time. So fingers crossed that we get to a point where we can have a world where you don't have to, like you say, do the 9 to 5 grind. Because you and I don't do that. Look at us. We're still awake and it's almost midnight.
I know. And, I like the 9 to 5, but I also work in the evening like you do. I mean, you do breakfast radio, for goodness sake. I don't know how you manage to keep it up, but someone's got to do it.
Oh, indeed.